live discussion. All right. So let me introduce our members. I'll start with HD Mo. Okay. HD Mo is the co-founder of Digital Offense. All right. He is a veteran white hat. Okay. Actually, I call it white hat. I don't really have. Okay. Some borders of white and black. All right. Next to him is Shiraj. All right. Shiraj is the founding member of NetSquare. Okay. He's based in India. Okay. On his left is Adam from LSD Group. Okay, LSD is the group of white hackers or researchers, okay, who discovered the RPC bug. Okay, and somebody used the knowledge of that bug to build MS Master, okay, and Achieve and so on. Alright. LSD did not create those works, okay? Some other people did. Alright. Okay. They just find out that Microsoft has a flaw with Microsoft. Okay. Over to continue with George Diaz. Okay, George is one of the assistants for less research in the Internet project. Okay. So he comes from Poland, Netherlands. Okay, and he's a very good electrical engineer, I think, looking at his presentations. Okay, hacking the circuits. Over to George's left is Encik Hussein, okay, Colonel Hussein, alright, from Leicester. Okay, we'd like to thank Colonel Hussein for taking his time to be part of the panel discussion. Okay, actually the fourth person on to the right, on your left is a technical panel. On to the right is the business panel, but we just combine them. Okay. Continue on to Nitesh. Okay, Nitesh is linked with E&Y, right? Okay, E&Y, not the local E&Y, the US E&Y. Okay. And of course, everybody knows Dinesh. Okay. Dinesh Nair. Dinesh Nair is well known for his he's an OSS evangelist. And over to the last person is Shamshul Jabri Happy. Dr. Nas Hanafikus. Okay, head of information and network security department for HNG. Okay, thank you for your time. Okay. Now, I've been to a lot of panel discussions, security conferences. Okay, I find that the Asian audience are normally very quiet. Okay, panel discussion, everybody is like, no question asked. Okay, so I hope we open the floor, questions to the audience. Okay, please don't be shy. Okay, you need to ask questions to them. Right, so please, the speakers in the middle, so just come up and ask questions. Alright. So I'll start off with opening questions to the floor. Okay, anybody? I think if nobody asks questions, they're not going to get out of this room. Okay, yes. Yeah.
Thanks. We spent the last few days looking at demonstrations of vulnerabilities and how people can exploit them. But I think that most of the people who attend this conference are from the techie level and not so much from management level. Would the panel agree that probably the difficulty in implementing security in organizations isn't really from a technical sense, but from a persuading upper management business sense? As an example, probably the best thing that happened last year from a security standpoint was the code break work, because it was actually a relatively low impact, fast spreading, high publicity thing that enabled me to go up to management and say, we need to patch our service. And it's harm-wise, it didn't really affect anyone business-wise. But because of the publicity generated, everybody gave me the green light to go and twist his arms to get things done. That's
okay. Anybody? I'm going to just open up panel members to myself.
Okay, hi. My name is Shamsul. I represent the MCMC. If any of you is not familiar with the MCMC, it's the commission that regulates the multimedia and communications industry in Malaysia. We're sort of like your small version of the FCC in the US, so we don't think we are yet that kind of commission in terms of clout here in Malaysia. Okay, responding to your question, yes, I do agree. Being the regulator, I think we have spoken to lots of ISPs in particular with regards to security. I think we could equate US ISPs as also business organizations. They do businesses, they do offer services. And when we speak to them, especially the technical guys on their part, I think they face similar situations as yours, which is really to win over management support in terms of getting the best infrastructure, getting management involved. Because in the end, I think, as what we would all of us would agree that in the end, management would ask for the ROIs, the return on investments. Now, if say an organization has never encountered any difficulties before, they don't see any need to spend money or to spend time or to spend money on training, on management skills on the people, because they can't see that thing happening to them. And I guess the difficulty here is getting management to understand the need. And I guess one of the things that the Commission is embarking or would like to do more is really not to speak to the technical guys, but rather to speak to the management in those organizations. Eventually, those people are the ones who are making the decisions in the end. And it's an ongoing problem, and I guess it's a matter of talking to them and getting them to understand.
Well, I guess I totally agree. I think the problem is due to human nature being that way. We tend to learn things the hard way. Example, for a little child, tell him or her not to touch something that is hard. He or she's not going to listen to you until they try it, and then they get hooked and they don't do it again. So bad things happen, people learn, and I agree that a lot of companies or firms don't want to spend money in securing themselves until something really bad happens to them. Another example is what happened to the United States INS before and after 9/11. I mean, even before 9/11, as a child, when I used to visit the United States, the way they would stamp your passport and give you a 994 card, and how relaxed they would be if you would always stay there. Even as a kid, I would wonder why in other countries, if you overstay, the police come after you, right? Not to the United States, but after 9/11, the whole thing changed. INS is not there anymore. This should have been done a long time ago, and I guess people unfortunately learn the hard way, and that's the way it is. I don't know if I can offer any solutions to that, but that's the way it is. It is human nature.
I'm not going to add more onto it, just to say that yes, I think we need to get management involved and evaluate why we need to do this. But the method you can use to assist in that is businesses are primarily profit driven. They want to increase shareholder value. If you can show in some way why downtime will cost the company money, and this is real money. If you're running a web service, it's easy to translate that. Your website is down for 6 hours, you've lost X amount of dollars. But for internal production systems, it's less clear. But if you can find some way of translating downtime, cash loss, actual cash, bottom line cash loss, I think your management will listen to you. It's a lot clearer. It's just making your case in that sense.
There was one thing I wanted to add, and that's you started your question about the technical aspects of the conference, for example. And as a pen tester, I see often that also from my work, it works the same way. If I only find superficial bugs and I don't have time or the possibilities to actually show what you can do with it, people are pretty relaxed on how quick they are to solve it, whereas I've this advanced exploit and I read all the internal email, they suddenly jump up and start doing it. And from that perspective, actually, it's very important that pen testers actually are able to do the most advanced exploits and to be very technical to actually get the management the insight of what the consequences will be. So in that sense, I think the technical part really also can help the business part.
I think there are two ways for a corporate to learn. One is a press way, press teaches them, and other is the consultants or internal awareness teaches them. One is a perceived costly, and other is really costly.
I think the question is very interesting, and we can talk about the answers to this question all night long. But I don't intend to do that. Okay, I'm coming from the National Computer Emergency Response Team view. To me, the outbreak of the worms like Cobra, Nimda, Blaster, Nachi has a blessing in itself, in which it teaches us how to cope with this crisis and with the reality. And in fact, it has helped a lot from the national perspective, from the even from the nation's perspective, how to handle this, think through in detail on how to handle this effectively. What I can see, everyone has a role to play, and we should not just think in a silo. For example, if you are from the technical domain, anything that you see that is of a concern, technically speaking, which could create an outbreak, should be communicated, and the information should be shared as much as possible to as many people as possible, not only to the top management of the organization, but I believe you also need to share this kind of information to a computer emergency response team like us, because until and unless we know the intensity of the problem, many will not be interested to look at it in detail. So we have a role to play. You as a technical guy, looking into these problems, notify your top management. They may react, they may not react, they may have the appreciation to it, they may not, depending on your organization business model as well. But I think you also have the responsibility as a Malaysian citizen to report this to us, the Computer Emergency Response Team, so that we can collate this information at a higher level, so that we can see clearly to how much damage can be done, or potentially it can go. By having to have this data and understand this repercussion, we will ultimately do our job in alerting government agencies such as the MCMC to call for a more consolidated effort at the national level. You see, until and unless these processes are followed through, I think the country can never cope with these cyber threats effectively. See what I mean? In other words, yes, the problems are down there on the ground, but somehow it needs to be pushed up and coordinated at the operational level, which is the task that is good to be given to the Computer Emergency Response Team. And I would say that the bigger picture of the problems can then be churned out into some kind of management repercussions that need, for example, prompt action. And this can be easily passed to MCMC and even to the, if need be, even to the National Security Agency of the country. So I think every one of us should look towards contributing in our own way. Anyone else want to say something?
Okay, I think there's some very good comments there. Okay,
Maybe we'll go for the next question.
I am Rahiman. This question is especially for Colonel Sid. Okay. Basically, I understand that NISA have organized a conference for SANS, which is a very good conference and cost. But basically, a lot of new, what we call it, new teenagers really want to seriously go into security, seriously want to go for hacking. Okay, so is there any future plan that for our government or SANS coming up with such an institution, especially for the professional who are really going into the security area? That's all.
Okay, yes, we used to conduct seminars in collaboration with SANS Institute in the States. But I think if you have noticed recently, we have not conducting that program anymore. This due to the fact that I think SANS has escalated, has hiked up the price to me, which is affordable in the US market, but it's too much to be borne by the Malaysian market. So for now, I think we will have to wait and see until the situation settles, where it becomes affordable to the people in our country. This one. Okay. Yes, there are many teenagers, school children out there who are very interested in internet security and hacking in specific. What can we do about it? To me, this is a very new experience that we are facing in Malaysia due to the information age and the policy that the government has put forward that we should all be IT savvy. Okay, so cyberspace and computers, internet, and whatever assets surrounding it becoming so appealing now that people want to hack. But this is also a dangerous game. If it's not being handled properly, it can become so damaging to some. Therefore, I have to be very careful here. I think maybe CMC from the government can comment after this. On one hand, yes, we want to fulfill their desire to teach them ethical hacking. On the other hand, I am not certain whether they're going to be very ethical about it, or they're going to misuse the knowledge of this hacking towards someone else, to attack some legitimate websites. So these are I would say the issues that need to be planned and deliberated properly before making a quick decision to go into on the ground and start this fire when the fire is not there yet. I foresee that yes, there is a need somehow for us to teach them the right way of this knowledge, how to use this knowledge of hacking in a positive way, not in a negative way. I believe there should be education even introduced in school about the cyber laws and the repercussion of intruding into someone else's systems without authorization. Okay? This is not a part of the syllabus yet in schools. Yes, this is actually a vacuum, a gap that I can see that need to be addressed as quickly as possible. I have no specific answers to this question as yet, and what would be the near plan on how to handle this. But I would certainly ask you and beg to you that you can play also a responsible role of adult inform and to educate teenagers surrounding you about the laws, about the ethics, about what is good and what is bad. Because the same knowledge that you use can make you go to prison and also can give you, an earning income. The same knowledge and the same action. The boundary between lawful and unlawful is so thin. And to me, yes, it requires attention, it requires education, and it requires everyone to start seriously informing people around you to be careful with what you know, what you have, and to use it in a legitimate way. That's all what I can say. Because it is very sad to see if some teenagers being held, under the Computer Crime Act of section of unauthorized access, and these are teenagers who may not realize that what they have done entails the extent of punishment of such. You want to comment?
Okay, there are several things there. If you were to ask me about can MCMC help get sense back in KL, well, we'll see. We'll try to do that. But then again, sense is not the only organization that offers good quality training. There are other avenues. In fact, locally, we have people who are, if not on par, probably better than them. It's just that those people are down there somewhere. You guys are still not getting yourselves known to us, so make yourself known to us so that we could help the general public. Second thing is on what the second part of the question is on, with regards to teenagers. No, I don't really have anything else more to add to what Colonel Hussein has mentioned. I think the best way to sum it up is that it is now that the younger generation suddenly they have this advantage over the older generation in that this particular technology, this knowledge is not shared between all of us, but it's more prone towards the younger generation. I guess those of us in our 40s and 50s, or well, I'm not that old, I'm still in my late 30s, those other generations in the 40s and the 50s, they do not share that same knowledge as you guys do, those in the early 20s and 30s. So you guys have that upper hand, and I guess some of them tend to use that upper hand in a negligent way. And again, through education and through sharing of experiences, I guess in the end the message will go through, and hopefully the knowledge that they have will be used in a better way. Yeah, thanks.
Firstly, a blatant plug. Speaking for Hack in the Box, I think we will continue organizing this conference every year as long as we're able to and keep it affordable. In fact, a bunch of us talking about it earlier. We may expand the format next year to include tutorials and workshops as well, to make it slightly more hands-on. So there will be an affordable conference, at least one. Anyway, approaching the second bit about teenagers and all that, I think they'll grow out of it. They may cross the side of the law when they're younger, but they will grow out of it. From personal experience, I mean, all of us here in the room, porn is legal in Malaysia, but how many of us have not seen porn in Malaysia? We all have. When you're kids in school, somebody will pass a Playboy or a penthouse, or you take it home, you look at it. But as you grow older, you no longer care if it's Playboy around. You just don't want to see it anymore. Pass your Playboys to him, but what I'm trying to say is these are things you grow out of. So it's not something I think we should be truly concerned about. Yes, okay.
Okay, maybe I can add on to that because actually one of the questions is along teaching hacking. Okay, actually in the States, alright, I think it was this year there was a big hoo-ha because there was a university in States, alright, was teaching part of the degree course to hack. Now, as Colonel Hussein said, it can be used for good or use of bad or good, right? But in my opinion, I think all this should teach the students how to do good programming practice. Okay, to a certain extent, maybe you may or may not want to teach them how to write expert codes, right? But that is like subject to debate. Okay, so this university instead was getting a lot of attention worldwide, I think, because they were actually teaching students how to hack. So, so what do you guys think? You know, let's start with HD. Do you think? I mean, giving if somebody asks you, okay, you know, do you think that university should start teaching people how to hack?
I mean, I agree that the first step is definitely going to be education. Like, get some basic information to schools about what the laws of your country are, what the laws of international lines are. So if you're hacking somebody in China, if you're hacking somebody in Malaysia, if you're hacking somebody in these states, you know what laws you're breaking when you're hacking outside of your current state law, or outside of your current national lines. There have been a lot of the universities themselves have been starting to do a lot of information security courses, and a lot of those tend to include ethical hacking courses. What I've seen with a lot of those, though, is people going into those courses really aren't when the first question was first raised, it was that there's a lot of teenagers, a lot of people who are just starting to get into information security, who are deciding, hey, look, I can break this server. That went on, they start breaking all kinds of things. The people who tend to go to the actual information security courses and they come in with a different perspective altogether. Most of them take these courses because they want to become an information security professional, they want to get a job in security, they want to do something other than just go break into machines. The reason that I have no problem at all with university teaching how to hack because the people who are going to that class aren't the people we need to worry about. The people we need to worry about are sitting in their room working on stealing credit card numbers from a bank. I mean, it's different perspective. I'm really all for education. If you get education to schools, people are always going to go try to abuse it. I mean, if you have kind of a similar example, if your school has like a wrestling team, your school has another sport team, the kids who go to that class, who try to get good at wrestling or go to whatever the sport is, they're going to go play it outside of school. They're going to start a football club, they're going to start whatever club, and that applies directly to things like chess clubs or hacking or any of the information security type education. So if you do start teaching kids about, here's how a debug overflow works, or here's how a performance string overflow works, and here's an example of how you can break into a server running this old piece of software, people are going to go out and try it. You can't really prevent that. I mean, you have to tell them, okay, what you're doing is wrong, you can get put in jail for 500 years for it under the new Patriot Act or whatnot in the States. But at the same time, they're going to grow out of it, they're going to try it, they're going to get caught, and some people are going to get, trouble for it, some people are, and it's going to go on. I mean, the education is important, and people should not do it because they're worried about what people will do when they know the knowledge. If you don't tell them if you don't put that information into your schools or into your colleges about what the laws are, what the lines are, and how things work, they're going to find it on their own, and they're not going to have the base of ethical knowledge to decide what they want to do with it. So if they don't learn from you, they're going to learn from somebody else, and they're still going to do whatever they're going to do with it. And you just have to tell them, okay, if you teach them from the beginning that, hey, this is breaking the law, this is not breaking the law, it's entirely different than say, them going online saying, okay, here's how I hack this kind of server, downloading an exploit and running it. A good example of this is with information property laws. If you look at all the lawsuits happening in the United States right now with the RIAA, they're suing like 12-year-old girls, they're suing 80-year-old women. I mean, they're going around suing everyone they possibly can because these people download music and they caught them doing it. You don't think that a 12-year-old girl is going to know the difference when she downloads her favorite pop song off the internet, she's breaking law. If there's education in the schools beforehand saying, hey, you can't do this, this is illegal, then you can get in trouble for it, she probably wouldn't have done it. Or if she had, they probably would have been to the same extent that they would have caught her doing it. I mean, the same thing applies across the board for all information property and information security laws. Is that if you don't tell people what to do, what not to do while they're still in school, they're going to find out what it is and do it on their own anyways, but not have a baseline to make decisions on. So hopefully I didn't answer your question.
Okay, as for the hacking course, the university hacking course, I'd like to say that there are, of course, different weird stuff taught at the universities, and everything depends from the context. If for example, it's just part of some kind of the wider security course, maybe this should be acceptable because from our point of view, the whole LSD groups, a good security engineer should know both attack techniques and technologies as well as protection methods. So, for example, this is very important because on our everyday tasks we usually have to decide whether we're given attack or threat that, for example, gets published. And this is real threat. And sometimes we need for that a very some knowledge, proper knowledge, and technical knowledge. And if, for example, we decide that this is not so much serious threat, we can, for example, postpone some patching processes, etc. So technical knowledge of attack techniques, hacking techniques is sometimes necessary for some specific context and for some specific people environments. And in the context of this university hacking course, it really depends, because if there were also some classes, security classes that were teaching protection mechanisms, this is quite complementary. But if this is just hacking course, of course this arises some thought that whether this is really necessary to teach someone to learn.
Can I add on this hacking university teaching hacking course? I think to learn how to hack is not illegal by itself. I mean, this is a knowledge of science, and the art within the science. I mean, as a computer science student, you have to learn, you have to know. In fact, even though it's not in the syllabus now, but right, you have to know on the vulnerabilities of the systems and how it can be exploited, how to exploit it, and how to defend it. Because until and unless you know how to exploit it, you will never appreciate how the difficulty and or the easiness on how to defend it. I think these are the knowledge realm, which I don't think we should block it or we should stop it. The only thing that I want to call all of you is to emphasize, besides those knowledge, is the rules of engagement. It's just like I'm a soldier. I'm from a military background. I train a soldier to shoot, and why they are shooting? They are shooting to kill. You see, we train them to be robbers, to survive, to kill the enemy, to go behind the enemy lines. These are dangerous knowledge, in which they can turn it to rob the bank or to do anything else. But we have to teach them also rules of engagement. These are how you should do, or how you should behave in a specific environment and in a specific situation. You should not go overboard. Okay? This kind of institution, or this kind of emphasis is not there yet in many places. This worries me. That's why I would like to call here, I think, to sum up. Yes, I think there's nothing wrong of teaching people how to hack, but I would like also to call for organizers in conferences like this to give a slot, to give some sort of time and a program where rules of engagement are also being taught, so that people would have, public would have a balanced understanding on what is right, what should be done, and what should not be done. Thank you.
Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say I agree. I think this motivation that you gave clearly expresses the need for education, and that goes, I think, both for general education as for the specific hacking education. And I think that, yeah, it shows you that you really need the education part, so that the hacking class will really help, because that's the place where you can tell what your side from the story is. As long as people do it in their own rooms at home, you will never reach them, and education is the way to reach people. On the other hand, I think that the biggest challenge, if you want to start such a class, is not so much will they become criminals, because I think that chance is so slim that it's not worth talking about. I think the biggest challenge will be the perception for the rest of the world. How can you explain that this is really useful to people that are not into this scene and that are not from the security background? And I think that's the biggest challenge, because only one student makes a mistake and everyone will say, oh, you see, this is the hacking school and they are all criminals. And that's one of the difficult areas I think this profession always has been dealing with, is the difficult perception of what we are actually doing and why it's actually useful and even a necessity to create a better environment for the future for us all. So I think that's also a very important aspect to pay attention to.
Okay, thank you, Lars. Is there any comments? Any more comments? Okay, right. If not, we'll move on to our next question. Next question.
Hi. There's been a lot of heap overflow lately, and a couple of us have been talking about it. It's really difficult to exploit these kind of things. And I first discovered about fixing heap stuff by looking into HD smoke code, where you use a create heap. It's really cool and smoking. And then somebody from Xfocus, they actually use they override the heap values, and then they get the shellcode smokings as well. So, but there's not been much paper about these things. So my first question is like, we'll maybe ask the HD more and stuff. You guys, were you going to be publishing some documentations like how to exploit the heap reliably? It's not really like, okay, exploiting is one thing, the other thing is like fixing the heap. That could be very interesting. That is the first question, whether you're going to release any things like that. Because I'm really wondering how you guys suddenly pop up with those kind of idea of using create heap and stuff. The second question, most probably, I would like to know how LSD fix the heap. I mean, your yesterday presentation was about how to exploit it. Okay, sending 50 megabytes of data and stuff. And but your Windows component don't really have the kernel widget that is downloadable. Don't really have anything that fix the heap. And were they going to be like proof of concept? Maybe not a working concept. Maybe just an idea of how to fix the things so that the shellcode works. Because if you're not fixing it, calling API and stuff, they all will not work. Excellent.
As for the first question you raised about whether we will we will describe in the paper the technique of reliable exploitation of heap buffer overruns. It's very difficult because it really depends from the time that we will have or not. During the last several months, we've been completely overloaded. To be true, we assume that during this conference we will release Microsoft RPC paper upon which this presentation will be given. Unfortunately, we didn't have time. We so much delays with staff releases, so that it is really unlikely that we'll write such a paper in the near future. So maybe if we find time in a couple of months, maybe it will be described and the paper will be released, but I think that this is a matter of several months. So as for the second question of heap fixing question, I wasn't personally involved in the process of developing proof of concept code for the messenger vulnerability. As far as I know, I will pass the microphone to the guy that was personally involved with this, but as far as I know, an epilogue of the Windows Assembly was used for this purpose, but I think that Michael will be the best guy to answer this question because he did the actual fixing the heap.
First, I'm not sure if we have enough time to describe this in detail, but okay. To be true, it's not so difficult because in the case of Messenger, the way that we use the heap and all allocations that were used during exploitation of this vulnerability was very simple because we overwritten and corrupted only one heap chunk. So the only problem was to fix this, the one header of one memory block, and we did it with 2 or 3 assembly instructions, and that's all. There is no more tricks to do in this case. But in general, fixing heap, we perform some more detailed analysis of this problem and find that even in more complex cases, if you are able to execute a code in a process that is a target of an attack, you are able to completely fix all memory blocks and even free block lists that are managed by heap managers. So theoretically, there exists a possibility to completely resume the application that had a heap buffer overrun and make it put it
While we are inside the process, or we are outside the process?
Inside the process.
Oh, still in the process.
And in case of our Windows assembly components, we do not include some general component that you simply attach that will fix all heap memory, because we assume that for every application, so for every case of exploitation, you will have to write some small piece of code that will do it for you, because for every, it always depends which way do you choose to exploit a particular vulnerability. I'm sure that every guy here who are writing exploits would write and wrote the same exploit in a different way. So there are so many ways to do it. That is why probably writing more general component is not useful.
But was it done in our case in the epilogue?
Yes, it was done in our case in epilogue.
I can just only add, in the case of stack-based buffer overflows, several years ago, in writing an exploit code for the stack-based overflow Netscape web browser version 4 on Windows 32 platform. And what we were doing was that we were restoring the stack state after the overrun, and we were coming back to the Netscape, and it was all done in such a way that everything looked as if nothing happened. Yeah? So the overrun was done, the Netscape browser, yeah, and some fact of binary was retrieved for it, it was executed, the stack was restored, the stack state was restored, and the return to Netscape was done. And in the case of this technique, we simply use some values that were put in the stack at some specific location. So you can always use some references, memory references that are always there. So I think that it is doable. Both the case of stack as well as heap based overruns to do a cleanup, some kind of a cleanup.
Were you referring to restoring a heap in a way that causes the process to continue functioning normally afterwards, or cleaning up the heap in a way that means you can write whatever shellcode you want to?
Before we can execute anything.
Right. The problem I ran into was explained that MSO 30395 was the heap is completely trashed. So when you start jumping into your shellcode, number one, the way that you exploit the vulnerability, the way that I chose to exploit it, was through the system exception handler. So when I've already destroyed the top level exception handler for the system, and then my code is running through, if any errors happen, it goes back to the system exception handler, jumps back to being in the shellcode again. So what I kept seeing was my code would export encode itself, start running into an initialized WinSock, and then jump back to itself, re-encode itself, and try to execute the instructions in dia.sig or dia.end instruction. There's some other ways I think using the fork technique that LST's been using with virtual AlecX and creating a separate process and then jumping into that process. I think you can bypass some heap issues. You can actually run arbitrary code that way, because the new process would actually have a heap of its own and then wouldn't have the same heap issues and whatnot as that. So if you initialize WinSock inside your new fork process, it may be possible to write shellcode that works perfectly. I mean, your old process will still be trashed when you turn back to it, but you can still write reliable shellcode that works regardless by putting it into a simple process. I guess the question for you is, when you perform the fork and start up your separate process and the create process and resume thread, is the heap within your process perfect, right? It's clean. You don't have to worry about anything else, right?
You in the fork process.
Do you fork the process, your fork process, you can actually digital without that crashing?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I think his question was mostly not whether can you restore the heap in a way that causes the process to exit correctly, but whether you can call shellcode that uses the heap as part of your exploit and not have it die halfway through, because when you let WinSock, it accesses the heap and then dies again. So I think if you use the LST's fork technique in your shellcode and then do your actual WinSock initialization inside your fork shellcode, it shouldn't have the heap problem at all. Your RPC service will still die a horrible death and you'll have to restore it some other way, but you should be able to at least be able to run your shellcode that way.
But the amplitude is like before I can fork anything.
I don't know, Michael wants to add something? Or I'm not sure.
The only one thing that can be done, it's, as Adam said, by finding some references to, you can usually find on the stack or in processor registers, references to memory blocks, or just have some hints that can lead you to the memory space that was corrupted. If you find even one block that is allocated on heap, you can move up and down and find blocks that were overwritten and try to correct every header. Even if you want to correct free block lists, you can also find the default process heap. You can easily find 128 free block lists begins and follow each of these lists to try to connect or at least remove the blocks that were corrupted. The next thing that must be done, I think that we did it in an earlier version of Windows Heap Manager. I think it was in the case of Windows 2000 with Service Pack 1 or 2. There was a case that if we exploit a bug inside heap free function just before performing just before jumping to our code, there was a critical section entered that successfully blocked the whole heap manager. So if our code started to be executed, and for example it involved some Windows API function, all this Windows API function didn't work because the whole heap manager was blocked. So what we did, we simply released this exited this critical section in order to correct this heap manager behavior.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. I think we'll move on to the next question. I think that gentleman in the present screen has a question.
Hi. Hacking is something is very interesting, but today the youth, they just download some programs and they go into the machines and they will be hacking. But why not? We suggest like what Eric says, like how to become a good hacker. And see, for everything you want to build a house, it won't happen. First you need to have a foundation. Like before you go into the hacking, you need to know the good languages and concepts of networking, all this. And is I like to suggest you people to the youth, before you go into that, you learn a good language. Even the good language, like most people likes, I interview some people, like what is the you know about Java? He say, oh, it is language platform independent. That is future aspect. When you look up at what is the architectural aspect, what is the memory models, if you know that, you can do the better programming. In the same way, hacking also is something called knife. What Mr. is saying, like you can cut vegetables at the same time you can chop heads. And if you can talk about like corporations, like when you take the offices. And another important is awareness, I feel. Even today, recently, like 2 weeks back, I was installing a server and the password is 12345. is common. And at the same, recently there is a Divine website was hacked because of weak password. And it's not like some things which system can do and some things which we need to avoid. And not only like the people sitting on the top, at the same time there is so many companies who is organizing on the security focus, the seminars. And it is better to go into the organization level and teach them how to keep your organization safe, rather than, because I really faced a problem once when I was implementing a project. Because of NIPTA, 7 servers overnight finished, which was implementing 7 months. And it took almost for us like more than 2 months. If they secure and they have a good password mechanism, there's other way, like not only the password. And I felt like it's awareness, and what your people likes to suggest to the youth and organizations. Thank you very much.
I think your question is, what's the advice you would like to give to the youth? Am I correct?
Pardon?
Maybe you'd like to repeat your question.
It's not a question.
It's not a question, it's
I'm asking the professor.
it's a statement, right?
I'm asking to the people, suggest to the youth where you start and how you build your career in the hacking. It's not directly going to the hack and download some tools and go into the port scan. All this stuff.
Okay, so I guess you're saying about education, right? So
Advice to the youth also.
sorry?
Advice to the youth.
Yeah, advice to the youth. So I guess it's just not really a question. All right, thank you. The lady in the back has a question.
No, from the university. Like you go and learn like directly easy language and so.
Hi, good afternoon everyone. I just have a question with regards to social engineering. In line with Kevin Minnick, who wrote about the art of deception, I have 2 questions. The first question would be for the technical side. When you do penetration testing, network security assessment, how significant is social engineering when it comes to finding out how secure is the network security of your client, for example? And for the question for the government and the corporate side, my question would be, how prevalent is social engineering problems, the human element of network security in Malaysia? Thank you.
We can start off with the... Oh, okay.
Okay, so to start off with the technical aspect. I have to say, so this is more from the personal experience side than from an actual oversight of the whole field. What I find with a lot of assignments is that assignments are scoped to quite a limited exposure. And that means so a client has a site and is interested in the security of this particular application or this particular part of his network. And very few clients are actually interested in the global exposure of their company as a whole. So, and in the few tests that I've done where there was this interest in the bigger picture, immediately the social engineering aspect starts to play a role, and quite a relevant role. Because you can often spend so much time on this remote exploit that is very difficult because they have this difficult infrastructure, etc., while walking into the building is much easier. And really much easier. I've had clients where I was introduced once, and then I could just wave by the entrance reception and just sit in a room all day without being asked who I was. All day plugged into the internal network of the company, port scanning, etc. So, and this is... Sorry? Was it the bank? It was not a bank. But actually, I have been admitted to a bank on a interview for an assignment without actually being picked up at the entrance. They asked me, do you know where you need to be? And actually, I was polite in this case, but if I said, yes, I know where to go, I would have just walked into the building. And this was a major, one of the major banks in Holland. So I think it's an issue because people within networking security, you're dealing with machines, and if you're an expert security person, then you'll be reasonably paranoid and you'll be configuring your systems reasonably secure. If you're dealing with humans one-on-one, people are always going from the positive side, and they will always think that if there's some positive thing in you, then they will hook on to that. So if you play into that part, then you can get people to do anything you want to. And if you wear the right suit or the right clothes for the role that you want to play at that moment, then everyone wants to believe you somehow. And that advantage, I think, is such that it's a problem that people don't take it into account with assessments. Because it gives a wrong picture of the actual security level. But actually, we are also, as I guess most of us, asked as computer security experts, and not as security experts per se. So I also have done assignments with other parties that did the physical penetration, and we did the computer penetration. So I've also seen the effect there. But there are very few companies that actually take this as a whole, and generally they are the banks or the military, but those are the few that do.
Just a quick thing to add on to that. A lot of times, we've had a lot of really small organizations ask us to do social engineering work for them. And the funny thing about that is their entire IT staff is one guy. If you call and you say you're a vendor and you're trying to ask for the password of his web server, he's the only person with the password. He definitely knows offhand that there's nobody that should ever be asking you for a password. However, what we do see a lot is cases where we use social engineering techniques to enhance our technical attacks. We'll look at things like we'll set up a fake website. The website will be, some looks just like the website / something else, but it's really a different domain. Or we'll do like DNS cache poisoning or otherwise make it look like that the site that we set up is really their login page or an internet website. So do things where we'll actually send out emails to the company saying, hey, we're checking password policies here. Please log on this page, enter your domain password, and we'll verify whether it's strong enough. And we'll send this out, we'll obfuscate the URL in a way that they can't tell what the real site is, either just by putting a different link into the email or whatnot. And 9 times out of 10, we have 6 people logging in and giving us their domain passwords. So there's a lot of ways where you can use social engineering attacks to enhance your technical attacks that aren't necessarily walking into a building or saying that, hi, I'm Bob, and IT, I need access to this. We have had a couple of cases where we called our client, we verified that some person was out of the office. We then called our ISP saying, hey, this person in IT, my boss is out of town, I'm a new hire, I need access to the web server to update our website. We just changed the rates are really competitive in our industry, we need to update it right now, otherwise we're going to go out of business. And you just keep calling them back repeatedly saying, no, come on, I really need to log in this, will you update the page for me? And you offer to allow them to do all the work for you. About 6 hours later, you usually succeed in getting the password. There's usually not quite so much of a walk in the park when it comes to IT things, because people on the remote end start getting paranoid, of course. So there have been cases where it's just been trivial to do. A lot of times people verify your caller ID number on the phone to say that, okay, are you really calling from this vendor or really calling from this ISP? But anybody who has a PBX of their own at their company or office can change their call ID to do whatever they want. So we make phone calls all the time with our phone numbers being different area codes, all just coming out of our PBX because we control that data on the line. So I guess the point is really that a lot of times you can use social engineering techniques to enhance your technical pen tests that aren't necessarily, like Mindic style where you start calling around a company and eventually get the information you need to do it.
Well, in my view, social engineering techniques will not go away. I mean, social engineering problems will still be there because of 2 reasons. One is because the success of social engineering techniques will depend on the behavior of the behavior of the individual itself. That's one. Secondly, is the culture of the organization. That's 2. And on certain instances, the two are bad. I mean, the culture are not even security conscious, and the behavior are also as such. So this is where you can do social engineering as much as you can, right? But there are also organizations which has a good security culture, but still has a problem of breaches through social engineering because of the human factor. A human behavior, he or she may be a person that careless, you know. You may say in the policy that, hey, don't write your password and you know, patch it somewhere, or don't write it down and put it somewhere. They still do. I mean, so many passwords they need to remember, so they need to write anyhow, somehow. So I think things will continue to happen, and the only thing that we can do is to mitigate those risks in a reasonable manner, depending on your organizational need or your individual need. That's how much I can say. Thank you.
Well, the only thing I like to add is I'm really bad at social engineering because of the way I look like, and at the same time I work in the United States. So especially after 9/11, if I walk into a building and try to commit any kind of social engineering, red flags go up. On the other hand, my manager, who is a regular white, good-looking American guy, he can get away with the stupidest things and win an engagement, and I can't do anything. I'll give you an example. I can't tell you what client this was for, but I know it's hard to believe. So during the engagement, he wanted to call up an employee and ask for her password, which would give him shell access to a non-admin account. And he was certain that he had a local privilege escalation attack that he could run and get to it, but he just wanted a local account. And so he researched on this employee and found out all there is to about her. And apparently she was part of some Catholic movement group / something. She was really famous on the web, so he called her up and he said, I'm the administrator. If you don't give your password, you will not be able to check your mail after 2 hours because something went wrong. And she did not believe him. She said, why would I give you my password? And this is what he said, well, I'm just doing the Lord's work. And she actually gave it to him. I tried that again later, it didn't work. But I guess the only thing I wanted to add is social engineering can be easy if you're confident and if you can blend in. And to blend in, you have to look like everybody else. That's my take on it.
My take is, I think social engineering is important because by nature I'm a lazy bastard. So if I can get something done the fastest way, that's the way I'll take. And what's faster than just asking somebody to give you something? Try it. It sometimes works a lot easier than you think it does. I used to do a lot of social engineering before, but after Asia Connect, everybody knew what I looked like. So the moment I walked in the room, I was like, don't go there. Because it didn't work. But I think social engineering actually augments what you do technically. If you look at the goal of what you're trying to get information. So it does not matter which channel that information takes into. You could try a buffer overflow exploit to get it off the disk itself, or you could just actually ask somebody for it. It works both ways. So that's why I think when in a lot of the security-based conferences I've attended, the message usually comes out is security is a process. It's not just important having secure systems, secure servers. You need to have the culture, you need to have a process, you need to have a methodology in place. Having that in place also helps against social engineering. So people don't think they're doing a lot so often, I think. I guess that's it.
I guess we've heard it before that in the link, in the security link, I guess people is the weakest link. I think we've heard that before. I guess, personally, I think it boils down to discipline. You've got your list of tasks, keep to it. And again, if administrators or office management is disciplined enough to ask those pertinent questions to someone who they don't recognize, then I guess you could avoid those kind of social engineering. Again, it boils down to simple act of being disciplined. It really has nothing to do with technology, it's just your everyday discipline. That's it.
Okay, we are running out of time. So I think on behalf of FTV, I'll ask the last question. Since we have a rich pool of panels here, great experts from US, okay, India, Europe, okay, and as well as local. Maybe I'll ask a very generic question. What, in your opinion, what do you think of the current state of security? Is it better, worse, no difference? Say compared with the last 2 years? Okay. Maybe you can start off with PD and move along. So I hope that everybody can give their comments, opinions. Okay, what is the state of security? Is it better, worse?
So the state of security, there's two different looks, two perspectives you can take. You can look at, are systems more vulnerable than they were 2 years ago? At the same time, you can look at, are people more aware of the vulnerabilities and capable of exploiting them? Although security has been improving slowly over the last few years, people are starting to fix things like buffer overflows, format strings, SQL injection attacks, things like that in their code. The amount of people who actually know how to find these vulnerabilities and exploit them is exploding. So even though 2 years ago you had 20 people who could exploit a format string reliably, today you have 2,000 or 3,000. So when someone does find a vulnerability or does find a bug, the chance of someone actually breaking into that server and using that bug is much higher than it was 2 years ago, even though 2 years ago the code is much worse. So it depends how you look at it. I think over the next 2, 3, 4 years, we'll probably see applications actually getting slowly more secure. We'll still have the mom and pop businesses who write their own code and write their own software coming up with just the most redundant, idiotic vulnerabilities that you'll keep seeing over and over again. Things like web server directory traversals, where everybody who ever wrote a web server is vulnerable to a directory traversal attack. I can't think of a single vendor offhand in the last 6 years who put out a web server who hasn't at least had some very heavy directory traversal attack in the code. I think we're going to see things get a lot worse before we get better. Within the next year or two, we'll probably see the internet crypto running all at least once more. I mean, I think Slammer was bad, all the worms that have been coming out from bad. None of those worms have done any damage to your systems at all. All they've done to crash systems. If someone rewrote Blaster, rewrote Slammer, rewrote anything else, so it actually destroyed your hard drive, you'd put a quarter of the company, a quarter of the world out of business overnight. I mean, that's actually the threat that we currently have. People should be grateful that the worms coming out are actually just increasing awareness, causing disruptions, not like literally destroying corporations and companies and businesses that propagate. So I think over the next year or two, we'll actually see one of those happen, and I think we're prepared for it. That's it.
I think security awareness is spreading across the world. A lot of new education systems are coming up with security awareness, and security posture is increasing, and defense techniques are improving, and overall security is improving at this point. Future attacks and current certain attacks are targeting to application level, so I think in coming years we'll see more application level defense rather than the generic defense.
I think that during the last half a year, the most significant change that can be noticed is the increase of security awareness that was primarily first by the Blaster, Soviet worms, etc. And this is one of the sides of the whole security thing. And as for the detection, I'm not sure whether there is a significant change, because we of course have better detection methods and applications, better security security operating systems is better and better, but when you compare it to the number of vulnerabilities that pop up of ours, you could just conclude that the overall security didn't improve. So when we look at the current state of the security, we usually compare it to the number of vulnerabilities that pop out. Yeah? So I remember the time when, for example, several years ago, we had a crisis, some kind of crisis, you could call it, with service where we were thinking that the number of bugs would be minimized and there will come a time when we will have nothing to find because all of the bugs will be removed from software. But the practice showed that the number of applications still increases, the number of technologies increases. They're too complex, so the bugs still exist. So I'm not sure when the protection mechanism will reach the state where finding vulnerability will be, the possibility to find vulnerability will be very low. Maybe in the near future, but I really doubt it. Personally, I really doubt it. Yeah, because when you, for example, look at the current state of the art of the antivirus products in Facebook, there are really simply automation products. Although they use some kind of heuristics, some meta simulators, virtual machines, they are very often unable to detect some simple applications of malicious code. So this is a good example of looking at the current state of the security.
Okay, well, I agree with most of what has been said so far, so I'll try to reword it. Basically, I agree with HD also that, yeah, I think it will at least get much worse before it gets better. That's for sure. I think what's also being said is that the main improvement is the awareness level, and I think that's a very important factor because it's a prerequisite before anything can change. Before people that are in charge are aware and want to make better systems or see that it needs to change to improve the security of systems. I think we are seeing the start of that. It's just the start where security will become more a requirement issue instead of an add-on, where it will become a bit more integrated, and that's the start where it needs to be picked up to get eventually, and then we're talking about years ahead, eventually to systems that are inherent, that are secured. So yes, in that sense, it's not the most promising picture yet, but I think at some point there will be improvement.
Okay, I agree with some of the speakers that as far as the awareness level, I think the world has seen tremendous improvement due to many facts. One of the facts is September 11, the rise of terrorism, and create awareness and concerns. So as far as the awareness level, I think there are improvements as far in terms of security, consciousness, and the wants to improve the state of security. But at the implementation level, I'll see this is still lagging behind, and I can say the hackers is still winning the war as compared to the defender. The attacker is still winning the war. There are many reasons to this. One is the evolution of I would say, secure programming is still taking place. We have the situation now where the awareness is increasing. This will create a situation where managers, CEOs, technical directors will emphasize more on security. But it takes time for the technical people to translate that into a more secure environment, proper programming and so-called more complete and secure products. So I would say that on the technical level, on the ground level, the situation is slightly improving. If before we can easily hack any servers, almost all of the servers, but now I think you will find some difficulties. Not all the servers you can easily hack in. There are some of the servers now quite difficult to hack in. I mean, that is the fact that the situation has improved. But again, the only thing that I think, the thing that I can point out here is that we have to address the gaps the gaps between the technical people and the management. See, the management may understand that, okay, there is a repercussion for the security issues, but they do not understand how to deal with it, because this is such a complex issue. The technical people, on the other hand, appreciate of a lot of things like vulnerabilities,
people are still using Outlook Express, so we're still going strong. But seriously, the growth of the security industry is directly proportional to the growth of the internet. More and more people in countries are getting online, and therefore, more and more people are doing important things, from home, paying bills and such, and so that directly correlates to the awareness of security. But still, the problem is that people learn the hard way, right? And the worms. For example, my aunt was hit by the blaster worm the other day. She called me out. But to her, even now, these worms are minor annoyances. She's, according to my aunt, my uncle, or my grandmother, if they're infected by these worms, it doesn't matter to them. They still go on with their life. As long as the computer still boots up and they can check their emails, here they go, which is a scary thing. I predict that the next when somebody is going to write a worm that's widespread, that's blasterwort, for example, and in addition to just being a worm and breaking into other systems, if it one of the side effects of something like that would be that if there was code in there to actually scan through the disk and collect credit cards and social security numbers and put that public, that is, I think, the next generation of forms that are going to make people even more aware the hard way. So I don't see an end, like everybody else said, to the problem. As more and more people get hooked on, there are going to be more and more problems, and we're going to continue to thrive.
Problem about being second last and last is all the good points that you made. I don't really know what else to say, other than you want the blue pill or the red pill.
Like Dinesh, I've run out of phrases to rephrase. I guess being in the regulatory body, we have done a little bit of checking, auditing here and there. While I can't divulge the whole information to you guys, I would say that we're not then too entirely enthusiastic about the whole thing. There are still rooms to improve in our own infrastructure in Malaysia in terms of building capacity, in terms of awareness. Awareness, again, I think is patchy. While those in the technical field have more awareness, those users, their awareness in some states, if you go to Kelantan or Terengganu in the eastern states, are totally not there at all. So again, awareness is quite patchy in terms of consumers. The infrastructure, we're not that too enthusiastic, but it's okay. Overall, if I were to give the Malaysian infrastructure, or those actually the owners of infrastructure in Malaysia, a grade, a report card grade, probably I would say they just made it or passed. So not too bad.
Thank you, Johan. We have come to the end of the panel. I was just to say thank you to the audience, thank the audience. You guys are very vocal. Okay, good job. And on behalf of Hack the Box, okay, I'm going to thank the panel for their insightful comments. I hope next year we will see you guys again. I'll pass the torch to Dinesh. Dinesh will close off the conference.
Sounds so formal, close off the conference. We reached the end of it. It's time to take the blue pill, go back to the real world. Thank you all for coming and making this a success that it was. Though today is the end of the two-day conference, the event actually goes on. It continues tomorrow with CTF downstairs at the exhibition area, as well as the exhibitions. I believe MOS is still in the lead I haven't checked the score recently, but I think more systems than he will send number 2. And I think we may see a surprise from HDMO either this evening or tomorrow morning. An announcement you might like to make. He's already confirmed there's been a new zero-day exploit found for 2003. Right? I think the time he needs to write an exploit for it over the next couple of days. So come back tomorrow. It's not the end of it. And thanks for coming. Hope to see you next year again. Bye, everybody.